making headlines. The President advocates for the abolition of the veto power within the UN Security Council. The President expresses strong disappointment with the United Nations Security Council for its continued inaction on the escalating crisis in Gaza. And the President warns that rising sea levels pose a significant risk to the economic development of low-lying and small island nations.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. I am Mariam Shamsud with PSMNEWS in English. President Dr. Mohammad Muizzu advocates for the abolition of the veto power within the UN Security Council (UNSC), describing it as an outdated and unjust mechanism that hinders global peace and security.
In a bold and decisive call during his address at the United Nations General Assembly's 79th session, Dr. Muizzu argued the veto power held by a select few nations, noting that it has repeatedly blocked critical decisions, particularly in situations where immediate action is required to prevent human suffering, as seen in the ongoing Gaza crisis. He stated the veto system undermines the principles of equality and justice that the United Nations stands for, allowing powerful countries to prioritize their interests over global welfare.
We know the solution. It requires courage and a strong will. We must abolish the veto. The veto continues to paralyze the Council from stopping Israel's genocidal war against the Palestinian people. The veto has allowed Israel to continue with impunity in practicing brutal occupation and risking regional security. The veto continues to enable the massacre of innocent people. So let us kill the veto. Let us also bring an end to the ineffective intergovernmental negotiations that have not produced a result for more than 15 years.
He further emphasized that no single nation should have the authority to override the collective will of the international community, especially when it comes to issues affecting millions of lives. Dr. Muizzu called for a reformed Security Council where decisions are made democratically, reflecting the concerns of all member states equally and ensuring that every country has an equal say in global affairs. The President concluded by urging member states to engage in serious discussions about ending the veto system, asserting that it is a critical step towards a more just and effective United Nations. His call echoed a growing sentiment among smaller nations who believe that the abolition of the veto would make the UN more responsive to the needs of vulnerable populations and better equipped to address global challenges.
President Dr. Mohammad Muizzu, speaking at the 79th United Nations General Assembly, expresses strong disappointment with the United Nations Security Council (UNSC) for its continued inaction on the escalating crisis in Gaza.
President Muizzu criticized the Council's failure to hold Israel accountable for its actions, which he described as violations of international law and acts of terrorism. President Dr. Muizzu pointed to the ongoing violence in Gaza as a travesty of justice, highlighting that the UNSC, despite its mandate to maintain global peace and security, has repeatedly failed to address Israel's violation of UN resolutions. He called the situation in Gaza a genocide, underscoring that world powers must not tolerate such atrocities regardless of a nation's size or influence.
Is this really the world you want us to lead into? Powerful members of this Council, is this really the example you want to set for others? Powerful members of this Council, do you really want to undermine the foundations of global order that you have built? The decline in trust in the Security Council is rooted in the lack of equal representation, accountability, and transparency. It's fueled by the Council's selective intervention in maintaining security for some, but not for others. We need change, and we need it now.
The president emphasized that the continued suffering of the Palestinian people demands urgent and decisive action from the international community. The president's criticism of the UNSC reflects growing frustration with the body's inability to address long-standing conflicts and uphold its responsibility in maintaining international peace, particularly in cases where geopolitical interests are at play. Dr. Moise reaffirmed the Maldives' unwavering support for the Palestinian cause and urged the global community to demand accountability for Israel's actions, calling the failure of the UNSC a grave injustice not just for Palestine but for the international law itself.
President Dr. Mohamed Moise warns that rising sea level pose a significant risk to the economic development of low-lying and small island nations. His remarks came during the high-level meeting on sea level rise at the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly.
In his address, President Moise emphasized the current climate emergency and its impact on the livelihoods, culture, heritage and economies of countries like the Maldives. He outlined 3 urgent actions necessary to address these challenges.
We need political will and a coherent approach. A necessary first step is to incorporate the promise enshrined in the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for Seeds into the international development and climate financing framework. Second, operationalize loss and damage fund. And third, transfer technology. We have the science, we have the knowledge, and we have the tools to combat climate change. In 1987, our capital city, Male, was inundated with sea swells. We have the will to thrive. Our call to action, our fight to live on, will survive.
The president called for doubling of adaptation financing to bridge the gap between mitigation and adaptation efforts. He urged the removal of cumbersome approval processes and advocated for financing based on the specific needs of vulnerable nations. Additionally, he stressed the need for more robust funding to support nations in responding to climate-induced disasters, emphasizing that effective deployment of the Loss and Damage Fund is crucial for vulnerable countries. The president highlighted the importance of transferring technology from advanced economies to small island states, advocating for favorable terms that would enhance local capacity to combat climate change. Reflecting on past events, the president reiterated the Maldives' unwavering commitment to climate action. He noted that despite limited resources, the drive to survive and thrive is deeply embedded in the nation's identity and history. The high-level meeting following the Summit of the Future aims to foster a common understanding, mobilize political leadership, and promote multi-sectoral collaboration to address the threats posed by sea level rise. It seeks to deliver actionable solutions for affected states and frontline communities, marking a significant step forward in enhancing global action on this critical issue.
President Dr. Mohamed Moise shares the critical threats posed by rising sea levels, particularly to coastal nations like the Maldives.
Speaking during the session on livelihoods, socio-economic challenges and culture and heritage in relation to sea level rise, President Dr. Moise underscored the far-reaching impacts of climate change, describing it as a hidden menace that jeopardizes shorelines, communities, cultures, and survival. President Dr. Moise emphasized that sea level rise is a significant concern for the Maldives, where 80% of the island stands less than 1 meter above sea level, and nearly half of the population lives within 100 meters of the coastline. Despite the Maldives raising concerns as early as 1987, the situation has only worsened over the years, threatening food security, economic stability, and potentially forcing migration. He made it clear that no Maldivian would willingly abandon their homeland and expressed determination to protect the islands, believing they will persevere.
We need political will and a coherent approach. A necessary first step is to incorporate the promise enshrined in the Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for Seeds into the international development and climate financing framework. Second, operationalize loss and damage fund. And third, transfer technology. We have the science, we have the knowledge, and we have the tools to combat climate change. In 1987, our capital city, Male, was inundated with sea swells. We have the will to thrive. Our call to action, our fight to live on, will survive. Thank you.
In his address, Dr. Moise urged world leaders to adopt a broader perspective on the issue. He highlighted the need for economic diversification, explaining that it is not enough to simply protect coastlines, but vital to safeguard the livelihoods of communities who have long depended on the ocean. He also stressed that as countries pursue economic resilience, it is crucial to protect cultural identity. He called for the implementation of robust policies, the provision of resources, and the development of resilient infrastructure to preserve the heritage of coastal communities. For him, safeguarding the cultural identity requires more than rhetoric, it demands concrete action. President Dr. Moise also noted that sea level rise is a global issue, not one caused by any single country. He stressed that the burden of addressing this crisis should not fall on individual nations alone, and called on the United Nations to use this high-level meeting as a springboard for further discussions and actions. In his concluding remarks, Dr. Moise called for tangible outcomes from the meeting, questioning the purpose of such dialogues if they do not result in decisive action. His address underscored the Maldives' long-standing commitment to climate justice and its call for urgent global action.
President Dr. Mohamed Muizzu announces that the Maldives' installed renewable energy capacity has risen from 53 megawatts to 68 megawatts in 10 months. He made this remark during the Maldives side event on renewable energy, part of his visit to New York for the 79th United Nations General Assembly.
Emphasizing the need for collective action to combat climate change, the president remarked that the country cannot continue with business as usual. He stressed that collaboration among governments, the private sector, and civil society is essential for making immediate and significant progress. President Moise outlined the Maldives' roadmap for transitioning to renewable energy, aiming for 33% of the nation's electricity demand to come from renewable sources by 2028.
To put it all into context, the Maldives spent over $65 million on fuel imports in just the first quarter of this year. On average, we spend about 10% of our GDP on fuel every year.
This plan includes investments in solar, wind, and waste-to-energy systems, along with enhancements in energy efficiency. In addition, the president announced that the government aims for 35% of electricity in the fisheries sector to come from renewable sources within the next 4 years, capitalizing on the sector's commitment to sustainability. He noted that this transition is viewed not only as a strategy to mitigate climate change, but also as a means to bolster economic resilience, particularly through ocean-based energy technologies. The president further encouraged investments under the Special Economic Zones Act, which requires a minimum investment of $100 million. He highlighted that a project for 150 megawatts of floating solar energy for Malé City is already underway under this initiative. President Moise called for support in securing accessible climate finance that aligns with global goals, framing the renewable energy transition as a pathway to fostering resilient economies and communities.
President Dr. Mohamed Muizzu meets with the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Singapore, Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, on the sidelines of the 79th United Nations General Assembly, UNGA. During the meeting, President Muizzu outlined his goals to attract more investments, enhance digital services, and address climate change. He emphasized the importance of technical support for public housing and shared planes to develop Ras Malé into a digital, eco-friendly city. The President underscored the need to improve digital infrastructure, particularly for the youth, who make up 50% of the population. He highlighted the necessity of providing full access to platforms like PayPal, which would enable young entrepreneurs to reach global markets and promote their innovations. In addition to discussing development and economic cooperation, the President and Minister Balakrishnan explored shared international interests, particularly given both countries' membership in the Alliance of Small Island States, AOSIS. The President and the Minister reaffirmed their mutual commitment to strengthening diplomatic ties and enhancing strategic cooperation on issues of shared interest. The Maldives and Australia hold discussions on tackling climate change and adaptation. The discussions were held during a meeting between President Dr. Mohamed Muizzu and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Commonwealth of Australia, Penny Wong, on the sidelines of the 79th United Nations General Assembly. The discussions focused on various areas of mutual interest, both regionally and internationally. President Muizzu and Minister Wong addressed key issues such as the stability and security of the Indian Ocean, alongside strategies for combating climate change and enhancing adaptation efforts. Both leaders emphasized the importance of ongoing cooperation to address these shared concerns and reaffirmed their commitment to achieving common goals. President Muizu expressed gratitude to the Australian government for providing scholarship opportunities and expressed hopes for expanding similar initiatives in the future. Furthermore, both the President and Minister reiterated their dedication to strengthening diplomatic relations between the two nations and collaborating on matters of mutual interest. The Maldives and Australia hold the inaugural senior official talks aiming to strengthen the bilateral ties between the two nations and enhance cooperation.
The talks were led by the Foreign Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Fatmat Inaya, and the First Assistant Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia, Sarah Storey. During the meeting, Maldives and Australia held comprehensive discussions on several areas of mutual interest, including governance, democracy, trade, tourism, climate change, defense, security, and development cooperation. Both countries expressed their readiness to foster a mutually beneficial partnership rooted in shared values and common goals. Furthermore, the importance of enhancing the economic bilateral relations were emphasized, with the Maldives and Australia affirming to seek opportunities for collaboration in various sectors including development, trade, and tourism. Both countries also agreed to collaborate in addressing global challenges such as climate change and environment conservation. The talks also underscored the significance of security and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. Maldives and Australia showed dedication to work together on issues such as maritime and aviation security and safety, border management, cybersecurity, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, and counterterrorism efforts, recognizing that a secure environment is essential for prosperity and progress. Officials agreed to explore policing collaboration between the Maldives Police Service and Australia to build resilience and stability in the region while enhancing border security. Additionally, cultural exchange was highlighted as a vital component of the Maldives-Australia partnership. Plans are also underway to enhance already strong people-to-people connections through educational programs, trainings, and community engagement across the islands. At the meeting, Maldives emphasized the importance of strengthening democratic institutions and practices, recognizing that a robust governance framework is essential for fostering trust and collaboration.
US stocks closes modestly higher as investors assessed whether a trend will develop in the week following the Federal Reserve's rate cut.
The gains came amid comments from Fed policymakers and steady factory activity data, building on last week's sharp market rally after the central bank's decision to lower interest rates. The Fed's pivotal move last week pushed major indexes to monthly gains, defying the historical trend of September as a weak month for equities. Comments from three Reserve Bank presidents were the main focus as investors searched for clues on why the central bank kicked off its easing cycle with an outsized 50 basis point cut. Fed officials including Raphael Bostic, Neil Kashkari, and Austin Goolsbee supported the central bank's last rate cut and voiced support for more cuts in the rest of the year. On the data front, U.S. business activity remained steady in September, while average prices for goods and services increased at the fastest pace in 6 months, potentially signaling a rise in inflation in the months ahead. According to the preliminary data, the S&P 500 gained 16.02 points or 0.28% to end at 5,718.57 points, while the Nasdaq Composite gained 25.95 points or 0.14% to 17,974.27. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 61.29 points or 0.15% to 42,124.65. All eyes are on Friday's personal consumption expenditures figure, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. Analysts say this release will be the week's most significant catalyst.
Donald Trump offers a series of incentives to encourage foreign companies to relocate to the U.S. if he wins the November 5th election and pledged to create special manufacturing zones on federal lands.
The Republican presidential candidate said during his speech in Georgia, the incentives, which include low taxes and few regulations, would be offered only to companies that relocated manufacturing to the U.S. and hired American workers. He said that companies that did not make their goods in the U.S., however, would face a very substantial tariff when sending their products into the United States.
As your president, here is the deal that I will be offering to every major company and manufacturer on earth. I will give you the lowest taxes, the lowest energy costs, the lowest regulatory burden, and free access to the best and biggest market on the planet, but only if you make your product here in America. It all goes away if you don't make your product here.
Trump was speaking in Savannah, which has one of the largest ports in the U.S. and is a car manufacturing hub. Trump said he would reward U.S.-based manufacturers with tax breaks for research and development costs and the ability to write off the cost of heavy machinery in the first year. It is unclear what federal lands would be offered to foreign companies under Trump's plan or how such an arrangement would work. If land remains in federal hands while foreign companies operate on it, those companies could in theory be exempt for property tax. Trump also reiterated a pledge to lower corporate tax rates, but only for companies that manufacture domestically. The former president said earlier this month that he would cut the rate to 15% from 21% for domestic manufacturers. Trump also took aim at Vice President Kamala Harris' possible visit to the U.S.-Mexico border, reportedly scheduled for Friday, September 27th. Trump accused Harris for waiting too long to address the border crisis.
Despite being covered by ice and largely desolate, football is still king in Greenland, whose players want to compete with other nations, but it remains a pipe dream until they join a continental federation.
Until now, footballers in the Danish Autonomous Territory have mostly played among themselves, and the national team, made up of amateurs, has relied on the goodwill of opponents to organize matches. The territory's Football Association, KAK, announced on May 28 that it had applied to join the Confederation of North, Central American and Caribbean Association Football since it was unable to join the European Football Association, UEFA. UEFA statutes stipulate the membership can only be granted to federations based in a country which is recognized as an independent state by the majority of the members of the United Nations. The Greenland court stated that this is the only place on earth right now who is not a member of any football association. Nevertheless, football, and in particular the English Premier League, is very popular for some 57,000 inhabitants of the world's largest island, which covers an area of 2 million square kilometers. In the streets of Greenland towns and cities, many children play football in the summer, and as soon as the weather permits, the pitches fill up, with one of the most eye-catching being the one in the northern village of Umanak, which lies in the shadow of nearby icebergs.
Well, that's all we have for you right now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more news updates. Have a good day. Goodbye.